Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning. We're
Muy
going to
buenos
go
días a todos.
ahead.
Vamos a empezar.
If we can go ahead and get started, we just want to be respectful for everybody's time.
Si podemos empezar, nos gustaría respetar a todo el tiempo para todas las.
Okay, good morning.
Buenos días.
Before we begin, I will allow our interpreter to introduce themselves and provide instructions on how to access our interpretation.
Muy buenos días, mi nombre es Ana Elvia Sánchez, soy la intérprete del día de hoy. Para el uso en español de Zoom, va a ser el uso de interpretación. Favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la amplificación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos. Luego, interpretación. Y luego, el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés, en el fondo, por favor, seleccione Mute Original Audio. Contamos con auriculares para servicio de interpretación si se encuentra en la sala de reunión. Favor de pedir los auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Announcement from the interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting scrolls are. Click on the interpretation icon, World, and select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, or etc., please press the ellipsis, 3 dots, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on Mute Original Audio to not hear the original Spanish low in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you are in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist at the lobby. Thank you.
Welcome to the November 19th, 2024 ASTAC meeting. My name is Christine Stensberg, and I'm the newly appointed chair. Thank you all for being here. First, we're going to start off by confirming quorum. Tessa, our clerk, can you confirm quorum?
Thank you. I can confirm a quorum for this meeting.
Okay, thank you. So to participate, members of the committee, you can raise your hand and I will call you by name. Anyone in the public here can submit a speaker form and we will call you. And then anyone online, if you can raise your hand on Zoom. With that, we'll start on item 1, which includes public comments, member comments, and a staff update. Are there any non-agenda public comments?
There are no public comments on non-agenda items.
Thank you. Do any members have non-agenda comments? Brian, any staff updates?
Yes. Ali Vasquez asked me to provide an announcement regarding some of the vehicles that were returned to the agency. So SANDAG has 15 free accessible minivans available for local nonprofit organizations and public agencies to help older adults and people with disabilities get around San Diego. All the vehicles have under 48,000 miles of use and are in good condition. Awarded applicants must meet federal requirements, use the vehicles for eligible purposes, and be responsible for costs such as fuel, maintenance, and insurance. The deadline to apply is December 6th at 5 p.m. More details are available on our website, or you can contact the grants distribution email at grantsdistribution@sandag.org. Any questions on those? Allie couldn't be here, but she did ask me to provide that update. That was it.
Wonderful. We'll move on to our consent agenda, which is the next item on our agenda. This includes minutes from our September meeting, as well as the 2025 proposed meeting calendar. Are there any public comments on the consent agenda?
There are no public comments on consent.
Are there any comments or questions from members? Yes.
I'm Sharon Beckus. Are we discussing now the minutes?
Correct.
My question is, under most of the accounts, it just says discussion. Are we not documenting what was discussed? For example, under 7, unmet needs, action, discussion, updates from transit operation, action information, discussion on flexible fees. So there's no documentation of what we discuss?
Maybe do you want me to take that or? Yeah, so lately our minutes have been reduced. The video is available online if you want to rewatch specific portions of that, but to save the clerk time and energy, they just put the highlights and then if there's any voting actions.
Also,
but there's, right?
Just to give that a little more background, the board of directors here at SANDAG has made a policy decision to go to action-only minutes for its meetings because we always post an audio video after the meeting of each meeting and what occurs. And excuse me, it's less impact for the clerks of the meeting to try to figure out what was said and put it in the actual minutes when you can go right to the audio and you can get a verbatim recording of what happened at the meeting.
I hear what you're saying. My question becomes, how can we approve something if we haven't gone to the website to say, yeah, I said that, or gee, I said this, or whatever? My opinion.
Are you asking about approving the minutes from the
Right,
last?
Right, because if I made some statement about widgets or whatever it is, if it's not in the minutes, then I have to go to the website first to listen to it to say, oh, hey, I didn't say that, I said this.
I mean, I think the minutes are reflecting the official actions taken during a meeting, right? The actual content of things like, you yelling at MTS about their shelters
Right.
isn't an official part, but, we're like on our unmet needs and things like that. We're noting those things and coming back to you guys with responses and things like that. But I think just like Tessa said, for the board's decision to just make the minutes.
And I understand that. I do get the part of making it easier to track. How about using AI? The ability to summarize in Zoom meetings, the capsule, the summary.
Again, AI is not a proven asset to getting the terminology correct or to saying exactly what you meant to say. It just still does the same thing that I would do or any clerk would do. It tries to summarize what you say and we usually get it wrong and we don't like to do that. And I can tell you that we are implementing a new agenda production software over the next 6 months that will timestamp in the audiovisual. So as you know that you made a comment on item 5, you can timestamp right to item 5 and that recording will come up and you can hear
just
exactly
like
what
in
you said.
YouTube where you go to the timestamp or whatever.
Yes.
Okay, just didn't know because I'm thinking, well, how can I vote on approve something if I don't know what I really said? Maybe I said it wrong or somebody else said something. And okay, thank you.
And you can always question that in the minutes if you think that what the minutes are stating as the action for that item is incorrect. You can mention that at the meeting and then it would be my responsibility to go back and listen to the audio and make sure that we captured in the motion what the motion actually was.
Thank you. I saw Charlene and then Wayne. Charlene?
Yes. In relation to this conversation, there's a lot of history of decisions made, and I'm not sure all of them became big motions, such as on the trolleys, having that little icon on them was intended for a specific purpose, and that is not everybody can see to read or are able to read the print on the trolleys, but many people can see the icon. And in time passes, those icons have now been linked or butted up right against the writing, so a blind person can't separate it out. But that was a key issue for a blind person or person with visual impairment to be able to tell what trolley they were on, because some people are colorblind and they may not be able to tell an orange line from a red line. But it's easy to tell a tree from a wave, from a sunshine, and I'm not sure what they're doing for the copper line, and that concerns me. But sometimes if you don't list some items, historically, it becomes a, lost in the lack of written minutes. Part of that comes out of the public comments. If I bring up something, it may or may not be there for future review. Thank you.
Thank you. And Wayne?
Okay, I'm not sure if the minutes for this meeting are kept under the rules of the Brown Act or the Roberts Rules of Order. But one of the strange things that a lot of people don't know is if it's under Roberts Rules of Order, the person that's saying that they're confirming the minutes, they don't even have to have been at the meeting where it was done. In fact, if they weren't a part of the board and then they become a part of the board, they can still confirm the minutes from the time before. Because you're just saying that you trust that the minutes had been taken. You're not qualifying each individual word that was spoken.
And just to confirm, this is a Brown Act body. We do follow the Ralph M. Brown Act and Robert's Rules of Order.
Thank you. Do we have anyone that will make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Charlene, I'll make the motion to approve the minutes as written.
Thank you. Anyone second?
Ted Kagan, second.
Thank you.
Can we clarify the motion is just for the minutes, or does that incorporate the entire consent agenda?
Sorry, for the consent agenda.
And then the motion maker is clear that she made a motion to move the consent agenda, not just the minutes?
Yes.
Can we take a vote?
And you can just all in favor, raise your hands. Any opposition, any no's, any abstentions? One abstention, and that motion passes unanimously with one abstention. Sorry.
Okay, we can now move to the next item, which is item 4, an update on the AFA Cycle 2. And we have a presentation from Ben.
What happened to item 3?
Item 2 and 3 were together as part of the consent, from my understanding.
Starling, just to clarify, the consent calendar that you moved to approve was the minutes, item 2, and the calendar for next year, item 3.
Thank you.
Any concerns about the calendar? Nah, it's a great calendar.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, STech members. Thank you for having me today. My name is Benjamin Gembler. Can you guys hear me okay? Great. I'm the program manager for the Access for All grant program, and I'm here today to share with you the funding recommendations for the AFA, or Access for All, Cycle 2 call for projects. Okay, so I'll be providing you with a high-level overview of the program today, followed by a summary of the first year of the program. Next, I'll review what happened thus far with the Cycle 2 call for projects. Then we'll focus on the project evaluation and scoring of project proposals, and we'll finish with our funding recommendations and our next steps in the process. So the Access for All grant program funds projects that provide on-demand, wheelchair accessible, or WAVE service for individuals with disabilities in San Diego County. It looks to provide WAVE service for those that are not adequately served by transit and traditional paratransit. Prior to this program, there were not transportation network companies known as TNCs, such as Uber and Lyft, that provided WAVE transportation in the region. SANDAG's 2020 coordinated plan identified on-demand service for individuals with disabilities as a high priority need for the region. The program defines on-demand as a response time of less than 12 hours, though response times are often far quicker. So a little bit of background. In 2018, Senate Bill 1376 created the TNC Access for All Act. The California Public Utilities Commission, known as CPUC, established a program that provided TNC services for individuals with disabilities, including wheelchair users needing a waive in California. The purpose of the TNC Access for All program statewide is to incentivize the expansion and availability of on-demand transportation services with people with disabilities. On the local level, local access fund administrators, known as LAFAs, are selected annually to administer funding to access providers. SANDAG has been selected as a LAFA each year since 2021. Funding for the program comes from a 10-cent fee originating from each TNC trip taken in the county and is variable based on the number of TNC trips taken in a given year. SANDAG oversees an annual competitive process for funding known as the Call for Projects and administers the program and also monitors grantee performance. So the first cycle of funding took place between May 2023 and June 2024, after funding was awarded and a grant agreement was executed. FACT was selected as the access provider and was awarded approximately $2.5 million to provide on-demand wave service throughout San Diego County. Their Ride Fact Now program provided over 10,500 wave trips and over 2,500 on-demand wave trips in San Diego County, with average total response times of under 40 minutes for riders requesting a trip. So just looking at our Cycle 2's timeline to date, in 2023, the Board of Directors approved our evaluation criteria. In 2024, in March, our call for projects opened and it closed in June of 2024. And then just recently in November, we issued our notice of intent to fund, our preliminary funding recommendations to applicants that had applied. So after an initial screening for eligibility, SANDAG staff implemented several new elements to the evaluation of the applications during Cycle 2. And this was based on recommendations from our grant programs from the Transportation Committee in 2023. The evaluation panel for Cycle 2 consisted of 5 evaluators who reviewed and provided qualitative scores consistent with the evaluation criteria approved by the Board of Directors. Staff held an initial orientation to help evaluators become more familiar with the program, the call for projects, and their responsibilities as evaluators. Scoring methodology was simplified per the TC's recommendation, using an average score approach that determines the total application score, which replaced the sum of rank scoring that had previously been used. Evaluators used an updated and more specific scoring rubric to help in their scoring efforts. Staff provided quantitative scoring of applications, and evaluators then had a debrief at the conclusion of their scoring, with staff and evaluators having conversations about project proposals, scoring, and funding. So to give you an idea of how the total application score is determined, you add the quantitative or the qualitative scores from the evaluators and then divide by the number of evaluators for an average qualitative score. And then we added the total quantitative score from SANDAG staff to that average, and the sum of those scores equals the total application score. So in this table here, you'll see the 5 Cycle 2 AFA applicants, their funding request, and the scoring of each project proposal. In the column on the far right, you'll see the staff funding recommendations. As you can see from the table, FACT received the highest total application score. As a result, they received the full amount of funding they requested. Given there was no funding left over from FACT's award recommendation, no additional applicants were recommended for funding. Per the AFA Cycle 2 call for projects, applications will be recommended for funding in descending total application score order from highest to lowest until funding is exhausted. You can find further details on project scoring in attachment 1 of my report. So where do we go from here? Now that the initial funding recommendations have been made by staff, we anticipate providing a staff recommendation to the Transportation Committee on January 17th. And upon recommendation, the board will be asked to approve the funding recommendations on January 24th. We also anticipate bringing the funding recommendations to our mobility working group. And then following funding approval, staff will work with the grantees to execute their grant agreement by spring of 2025. We anticipate Access for All Cycle 2 funding to begin shortly thereafter, with service we anticipate to conclude in March 2026. And that concludes my presentation. I'll send it back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair. There are no public comments on this item.
Are there any comments or questions from members? Okay, seeing no further comments, we can move on to the next item. Thank you, Ben. For item 5, we will hear information from the regional safety planning updates from Sam and Jacqueline.
Good morning, Chair and STAC members. It's a pleasure to be back here again this morning. My name is Sam Sanford. I'm joined today by my colleague, Jacqueline Sisk, and we are both planners in SANDAG's Regional Planning Division, here to provide an update on regional safety planning activities that SANDAG's been working on for quite a while now. We've come to this group before, I believe back in September 23 with the kickoff of a Regional Vision Zero action plan. So today we're excited to come back with the kind of the bookend of that, where we're able to talk through the final plan and what that looks like as that plan was recently completed, and also to talk about updates to safety targets, which is another requirement, and we want to bring those two processes together, the Vision Zero action plan and the safety target process as well. The Vision Zero action plan officially kicked off back in September of 2023. It was funded by U.S. Department of Transportation funds through Safe Streets and Roads for All, which is a new grant program that the U.S. Department of Transportation set up. A key note about this plan is that it grants eligibility to all local jurisdictions, to the county, to tribes, and they're able to apply for implementation dollars through that grant program, which is funded at $1 billion a year for the nation. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Jacqueline Sisk, to introduce the plan.
Thank you, Sam. So the Regional Vision Zero Action Plan begins on page 22 of your agenda packet, and every statistic in this plan represents a human life. So on the screen there, you'll see 4,433 icons on the screen to represent that these are 4,433 people that have died or suffered life-altering injuries on our roadways in San Diego region. Between 2018 to 2022, 4,433 people died, and this is why Vision Zero exists and why SANDAG developed a Vision Zero action plan. The goal of Vision Zero is to eliminate traffic fatalities by designing systems that reduce the severity of human error. Mistakes are inevitable, but fatalities don't have to be. By prioritizing safety, Vision Zero not only expands mobility options, but it also enhances the health and quality of life. Cities that are committed to Vision Zero have shown that progress is possible. A key word in this plan is action, and we want to reiterate that progress is progress, and building projects does take time. But the actions that are laid out in this plan have been proven strategies to reduce serious injuries. Within the Vision Zero action plan, we have Chapter 1, which discusses the purpose and importance in accessible terms. Chapter 2, which provides custom analysis of challenges specific to the San Diego region based on our unique roadways and communities. And Chapter 3, which summarizes community and engagement and prioritization process that was used to identify locations with the greatest opportunity for these enhancements. And the prioritization factors include social equity, trip activity, risk factors, community feedback, local plans, and projects. Chapter 4 details the role of SANDAG and implementing safety solutions by laying out a roadmap for cities to make progress towards Vision Zero, while outlining a progress that will be evaluated and monitored. So now we're going to take a look at the structure of implementation actions. The goal is to institutionalize change in all that we do. With this in mind, we worked towards weaving in safety into typical processes and roles that created a structure that you see on the screen. So with this, we have 7 implementation actions. The plan goes into further detail in Appendix C, which fully lists the implementation actions. But today I do want to point out a few examples under each of these actions. And starting off on the left-hand side with coordinate. For coordinate, the idea that we are going to coordinate opportunities to integrate safety in SANDAG events. And then the next implementation action is advocate, developing best practices, guidance specifically focused on addressing critical crash profiles and risk factors for our region. Under plan, assisting local agencies in identifying roadways eligible for speed limit reductions. Under fund category, we have exploring prioritization process for grant projects and address crash profiles and risk factors again for the San Diego region. Under educate, partnering with local governments to create targeted education resources for at-risk groups and groups disproportionately involved in high severity crashes. Under evaluate, developing a transition plan for acquiring traffic safety data and addressing data gaps that are identified in the development of this plan. And lastly, implementation, develop a outline platform to share data and resources with local governments and partners. On this slide, we will dive a little deeper on 3 specific examples of implementation actions. The first one is Assembly Bill 43, or for short, AB 43. We're looking at supporting local jurisdictions with new legislation. Assembly Bill 43 is now fully in effect, and it provides more flexibility for owning agencies to reduce speed limits on the roads that they own. There is a technical analysis for this element for safety corridors, and SANDAG, with the support of our consulting team, has developed the methodology and the data that jurisdictions will need to lower speed limits. Local jurisdictions do have the option to utilize this data, and they can elect to reduce speed limits on the roadway, but essentially the materials are going to be provided to them and they can make that decision on their own. There is additional elements of AB 43, and we're working with our consultant team to develop guidance on how to work through those elements. The next bullet list is our local agency Vision Zero resource hub. So for the resource hub, we're working with our local agencies to provide an online resource. This online resource is a product development tool for local agencies that will have data from this plan. It will show our 2 networks, the Safety Focus Network and the Systemic Safety Network, and the prioritized elements and scoring. The resource hub will also house our digital engagement outreach comments that we shared with you last winter, and ideas for countermeasures or safety solutions based on risk factors on those prior portions of the network. And the next item on the list is SANDAG does help to manage 2 grant programs, the first being Active Transportation Program and the second Smart Growth Incentive Program. The criteria for these programs have been updated to better align with the Vision Zero Action Plan and provide incentive for projects that are in close proximity to both the safety networks. The safety focus network and the systemic safety network. Points are awarded for these improvements to safety projects. And the next steps for the Vision Zero Action Plan, as discussed in the previous slide. So the top of the list is Assembly Bill 43, implementation support. We are convening with the local agencies, project development team, the second week of December. And we're working with local agency staff to showcase what the data will be looking like and opportunities for implementing that new legislation for reducing speed limits. Some jurisdictions have already taken lead on this and they're doing a great job. And this again is a resource for those that want additional support with that. Next down on the bullet is 2025 regional plan. Similar to the 21 regional plan, which had a policy element within it for Vision Zero, the 25 plan will have a similar policy element in it with insights for the plan's development. We will be supporting agencies for the Safe Streets and Roads for All to assemble projects. SANDAG is here to help on the technical side with that element, and we do want to maintain that momentum for this cross-jurisdictional collaboration. And we are planning to create a safety task force that will continue the productive conversations that we've had with our partners this year. We are here to support jurisdictions that are seeking funding for future funding opportunities with data from this plan. And the last bullet point is performance measure 1 target setting. In previous years, we have gone with the state's targets, but now that we have our own Vision Zero action plan, we are working on setting our own safety targets. And I will now pass it off to Sam so he can get more in depth with the performance measure 1 target setting.
Thank you. So that's kind of the wrap up of the Vision Zero action plan that's freshly finished, and diving right into some of those implementation actions as we have this part B is talking about setting regional safety targets. Setting targets in the realm of safety has been a requirement of metropolitan planning organizations like SANDAG since 2018. So myself and other staff have been coming to this group, to other working groups for the last several years and setting these targets. In general, for these past several years, we've been adopting the statewide targets. So SANDAG has the option of either supporting the statewide targets for safety or developing regional safety targets. And we've always gone with the statewide targets, in part because we didn't have a plan or methodology to develop anything else. But we had heard from working groups like yourselves and also policy advisory committees that as soon as we have a plan, a safety plan, that we'd like to have some regional targets, some targets specific to the San Diego region on how we're going to address the challenges of traffic safety. That's a little bit of a background. So now we are looking at setting up these regional targets. And at the end of this item, I have some discussion questions where I'd love to hear thoughts from this group about this process. The second bullet is a mention of 3-year targets for decision-making. We're required to set a 1-year target by Federal Highway Administration. However, a 1-year target is very challenging in informing decision-making. Essentially, by the time this target would be established in January or February of 2025, the capital improvement programs, the overall work programs, all the decision-making documents of how we're going to allocate resources will be finalized before we have the target. So the target doesn't have the opportunity to come in and feed into that decision-making cycle. So what staff is proposing is setting a 3-year target, so a target 3 years out, and then back calculating to the federal required measure. And I'll show some graphics on how this is going to work in the coming slides. The last bullet on there, performance measures, these are the 5 measures that are required of SANDAG to establish. The methodology of how we monitor them is all set in federal rules. and the data sources as well are also set in those rules. So we're pretty much tied in how we do this. It's now how do we set the targets? That's the spot where we have the most flexibility. So a little bit about the target setting process. This first bullet walks us through, essentially we start off looking at current trends, what have we seen in the last several years, and then something we often denote as influencing factors, factors that might push the trend high or low or might be adjusting that trend. And then we have to account for some of the challenges, missing years of data, and then expected futures where we think we're going to be taking in those influencing factors. So here's a graph. We see the purple bars for annual fatalities in our region. And on the y-axis, on the vertical axis, we actually have the numbers of fatalities, of traffic fatalities in our region, stopping in 2022. That's the most recently available data. Now, what we want to establish per staff's methodology is first our trend line, figuring out, it's generally increasing over time for the last several years. We're looking at a decade right now. We want to establish a target in 2027. And I just have these ovals to denote a general area, and then back calculate to 2025, which is our required target year. Some of the challenges we need to address is that we don't have data for 2023 or 2024. Even though those are historical, the data is not final yet, and we're not allowed to use them at this point. So we have to estimate what those years would be, and then come up with some range for target setting. So in these purple dashed lines, some range of, is it going to be slightly higher all the way to slightly lower from our current trend? So that's an overview of the process. What we're trying to get to today is an understanding of should those purple dashed lines or dotted lines be higher, flat, or lower. So I mentioned influencing factors. A couple of the ones on this slide, the top section is supporting influencing factors. These are items that are new, whether they be policies or regulations, major programs or projects that open to traffic and have a supporting impact on traffic crashes, and especially those higher severity crashes. Regulations are going to have some of the greatest impact because they affect the entire traveling public, not just one intersection that might have a great improvement, but it only improves those that are traveling through that intersection. So the top three that I listed on here, Assembly Bill 43, Assembly Bill 13, and Senate Bill 960, these all are more large-scale, statewide measures. The top one, Jacqueline mentioned before, this is additional flexibility for local jurisdictions to reduce speed limits. As speed limits are reduced, the amount of energy that occurs in a crash is lowered and the survivability goes up. That is limited to at least the portion that Jacqueline was mentioning earlier about safety corridors. That's a maximum of 20% of a local jurisdiction's network. So it's a tool, but it has limitations as well. A new bill that's going to go into enforcement phase coming up in January of this year, or excuse me, January 2025, is Assembly Bill 413. This one is about intersection visibility and will prohibit vehicles from parking close to intersections and crosswalks. And the idea, it's also called daylighting of intersections. The idea is it provides both the driver and active transportation user, whether it's somebody who's walking or is on a bicycle or other mobility device, to see each other. So they're not stepping out from behind a parked car into a crosswalk. The last one on, SB 960 on complete streets. This is a bill that really affects Caltrans and one of their funding sources and provides targets for integrating complete streets elements within their projects. And complete streets is making it essentially a facility for all ages and abilities. So thinking of those three as those are all supporting safety. You can also think of any projects that open to traffic between now and 2027, any programs, whether it be education programs, encouragement, whether we have programs for bike education, driver education, campaigns on safety, those would all fall in that category. Other influences that staff looked at were demographics and mode share, vehicle fleet as those start changing, and the economy. All these impact the amount of travel people do. We were not able to suss out how those influences would be positive or negative into changing of a trend on crashes. So we left those out, but I did want to note that those were evaluated as well. So the next slides really get into the crash statistics for our region, looking back the last decade. So again, this is a larger image of the first graph I showed, but it is traffic fatalities in the San Diego region from 2013 to 2022 as shown on the horizontal axis, and the number of fatalities on the vertical axis. The purple bars show the number per year, and the blue line is the 5-year rolling average. And you can see on this measure, it's increasing over time from 2013 to 2022, and the rolling average is increasing as well. If we look at the fatality rate, this is the same data, but it is normalized or controlled by the amount of driving that occurs on our roadways. So it is the number of fatalities divided by the essentially 100 million vehicle miles traveled, or VMT. And that calculation, the change is much more subtle. It is looking more flat, but is a slight increase over the last 3 years on the rolling average. Changing to serious injury crashes. Here we have the blue bars denoting the serious injury, and then the 5-year rolling average in the blue line, again showing a positive or increase over time, and on the 5-year rolling average as well. And then the serious injury rate, again normalized by the amount of driving that occurs in our region, it also is showing an increase. The last measure, the 5th measure, is about active transportation, and it brings in the number of serious injuries and fatalities for non-motorized users. So anybody outside of a vehicle, and this is also increasing for our region. And this is consistent with what is Caltrans is experiencing statewide, and it's consistent with what is occurring nationwide as well. So the discussion questions, 2 that I'll bring up here on this slide that I'd love to hear STAC's thoughts and input on. First is, are there other safety influences that should be considered? So I mentioned some of the assembly bills and ideas about programs and education projects, but there might be others that we're missing. Second question is, given the historic crash data, the safety influences, the region's Vision Zero goal, and we'd like to get your input on the future safety targets for 2027. What staff is really looking at is, should the trend to inform that target, should it A, continue increasing as data is suggesting, B, flatten because we expect that there's going to be some changes in how our region is traveling, or C, decline and get even better? So those are the 2 questions that I'd love to get feedback from this group, and I'll turn it back to the chair for facilitating discussion.
Thank you so much. We'll actually start off with public comment, and then we can move to discussion. First, is there any public comment?
Thank you, Chair. I do not have public comment on this item.
Charlene?
Such a lot of information passed on. One of the things in talking about the education part is to educate drivers in regards to pedestrians with disabilities, because there are laws that say, for instance, if a person with a white cane or a guide dog are at a corner trying to cross the street, that they are to stop, period, not just, maybe they're not crossing. If I'm facing a street, assume I'm going to cross, because it is very hard when people are making left turns, right turns, and especially the right turns, and I'm in a crosswalk, there's many times that they just don't yield, and there's a lack of education. The other thing is in considering some safety issues, that the markings that they have for bicycle lanes or whatever, when they're painted, blind people don't see them. I don't know that I'm crossing into a bicycle lane because I have no way to tell. So there needs to be a better distinction so that people with disabilities are considered more when considering safety than the general population, because we have more issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Sharon?
I think another consideration also might be the infrastructure. Sometimes I'll go to a stop and I have to cross and I use the timer, 13, whatever it is. But the infrastructure on that street has deteriorated. So what would normally take 13 steps to get across or whatever it might be is fine if the road is in good condition. When it's not in good condition, I have to zigzag cross, avoid this crack, avoid that hole, make sure I see the driver. So the timer is sort of off from the actuality in this street itself. So the infrastructure needs to be taken into consideration too under road repair.
Thank you. Robert?
Are you concerned that the target setting may be flawed using a whole number? I see that everything you showed us uses a whole number. So if you've had 100 fatalities in a year, you need to identify, were those 100 fatalities, were they drunk driving? Were the majority caused by distracted driving? So, or from 15 to 17, are they new drivers? I mean, young kids like to speed, and that could cause a fatality. But to start to break down that information to identify what is the cause of the fatality, because if you have drunken driving, but you're doing the speed management, adding those kind of bills and stuff like that, that bill is not going to help anybody who's on drugs or alcohol or a young teenager. So break it down and start to identify what was the cause of the fatality, then tackle it from that perspective. Have you thought of that?
If I may respond to that one. Thank you for bringing that up. And this is where we're able to start using the Vision Zero action plan, which actually dives into that and looks at the primary collision factor, what were the preceding events to crashes. So we're able to break down the proportion of, in this example, fatalities, how many are at intersections, mid-block, if there's issues with lighting. So we're able to do that now, and that's where we're finally able to start setting up regional targets. So that's very on point with why we're doing this at this point.
But the cause of the accident, not that it happened at an intersection, what was the cause of the accident? Because you can just say, well, it happened at an intersection, so we must have a problem with our intersections. That may not be the case. That's where I'm going. You got to drill down deeper to get to the root cause.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point.
Ted?
Yes, thank you. I work on Vision Zero with another organization. It's a very serious subject in East County. Two things immediately is that we need to educate the drivers in terms of making a right turn on a red light. In El Cajon, they don't obey that rule. And number two, the lighting devices need to be adjusted. And I fight with the city hall every week, every month, and we need to 17. And many of the lights are 17 seconds. Well, as a healthy person, 17 seconds, it's hard to cross Fletcher Parkway, for example, or 2nd Avenue in El Cajon. It takes at least 20 seconds. So the timing devices needs to be readjusted as well throughout the county. That's a very serious subject in El Cajon.
Hi. So I want to suggest that people with disabilities be actively involved in the planning and the overview, or how you could put that, but if access points or accessibility are not viewed from the perspective of people who are going to rely on them, there's so many times that situations slip through the cracks that just one example I heard of not too long ago, I don't know if it still exists or which terminal it was, but the disability access point for the trolley was placed so that the person would have to find their way across other trolley tracks to get to it. So things like that, I mean, you don't know it until someone who is living it can experience it and say, hey, you know what, this doesn't work. This is a problem. This is what I'm running into. And it happens over and over again. Sometimes we can get action on it or not, but if you're planning safety, then get people in there who are going to need to rely on that extra step. As was stated earlier, if you can't see the lines, you don't even know if you're in a crosswalk. And I know one situation, I'm in North County, where there's no way a person can get all the way across that street on one traffic light. And if you're on the west side of that street, you can't tell what the traffic light is showing because the sun is hitting it and it's very dangerous. So that's my thought.
Wayne?
Okay. First, I was just kind of wondering about AB 43. It says it gives them the right to change the speed limits in the local areas. Didn't they always have that right?
So AB 43 provides more flexibility for local jurisdictions to set their speed limits. There's a manual on uniform traffic control devices that specifies when a traffic engineer and when a city is allowed to set speed limits. And oftentimes they were required to adjust up. And this provides them more flexibility to adjust down and even take away an additional 5 miles per hour on a portion of the network. So it adds more flexibility where before it was much more rigid. Essentially, when they did a speed survey, they'd have to take the nearest number of increment of 5.
So when I look at the trend upward of fatalities and serious injuries, was the speed limit less in those prior years?
So AB 43 has only really been in effect this year. And few jurisdictions have actually made any changes. Few have started now, but that would only be reflected in the 2024 values. But hopefully we start seeing more in 25 and on.
Okay. And then another thing I'd be interested in knowing, in the areas where they have bike lanes now, is there more or fewer serious injuries and fatalities?
That one we can look up for you and get back to you on that one.
Thank you.
Charlene?
Yes, while you're looking at all the infrastructure and everything, I've never been so thrilled in a city as I've moved to Chula Vista, and I'm so thrilled at all the audible signals. They don't only help blind people, they help distracted public, people looking at their phones, whatever. It lets me know that I actually have the walk light and I have the right to at least attempt to safely cross the street. I know there's no such thing as a safe crossing because there's too many factors, but that adds a great amount of safety for me and other people to have the audible signals. I can also use them to locate where I'm at because the newer system, I can push the button, it'll tell me what the streets are. So audible signals not only help the blind, but they help the general public. And the more signals that are in place, the better it is for people. Thank you.
Thank you for this discussion. I'm curious if anyone has anything on the second point about if the recommendation would be to continue the trend, to flatten, to decline. Any thoughts? Clyde?
Well, just off the cuff, I think that we need to expect it to increase because our population increases, our population ages. With more people, no matter what you do, you're going to have that probability. Also, I want to mention that maintenance is really important too. It doesn't help to have audio signals or any other device available, but if they're not maintained, if they're not working, and even I continually run into gaps where something I needed to rely on. I just rode the bus down here from North County. I took 3 buses. The first bus let me off completely at the wrong stop, the wrong stanchion in the hub. And the third bus had absolutely no audio, no call outs, nothing. And, you know, we're really interested in doing wonderful things, but we need to be more proactive in maintaining what's there. So that's my thought. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further comments, thank you so much, Sam and Jacqueline. Thank you. Okay, item 6 is an information item with updates from MTS, NCTD, and FACT. I'll let Brian introduce the representatives from the operators.
Thank you, Chair. We'll start with MTS. Charles.
Charles Pasaple. I only have one general update for everyone. MTS recently has hired an independent consultant to complete a feasibility study on bringing all of our contracted services, fixed route, paratransit, and minibus in-house. So this will go over the next year. They'll collect data, do interviews with the contractors, with MTS staff, and then after that study, they'll present it to the board, and the board will approve if we bring in all of our services in-house or a modified plan. So that's it.
Thanks, Charles. Robert?
Yeah. Mobility services, our microtransit services in the city of San Marcos has been very successful. We're seeing increased ridership month after month. We anticipate to roll out the next city, which will be the city of Vista, on May 18th. We're going to push back the bid for our drivers from April to May to align with the May 18 date, so we could roll it all out together. So that's what's happening there. We are still moving forward with insourcing all of our bus services in-house at NCTD. So we're putting all the pieces together, and as I get more information, I'll come back and present it to everybody. Thank you.
Charlene, we'll do all member questions at the end, just so we can make sure we get public ones first. And then FACT, Allie?
Thanks, Brian. FACT is continuing to provide trips through our Ride FACT program. We still have a slight cap on it, but we are increasing slowly over the next 6 months. Also, FACT staff and providers were on standby for the PSPS event last week or 2 weeks ago. We were in collaboration with 211s, SDG&E, and Salvation Army to provide trips to the command centers and to hotels and to the Salvation Army sites. That's it.
Thank you. Are there any public comments on this item?
Thank you. There are no public comments.
Okay. Any member comments? Yes, Charlene.
Yes, I have a couple. One of them is directed at North County, and that is you have the flex buses And for instance, Wild Animal Park is covered by a flex bus, but you can't get paratransit there. And I'm wondering, because the general public can take a flex bus and walk from the bus stop to the Wild Animal Park, but a person with a disability who can't walk or to the park from the fixed route, then has no service, which is not equal service. Can you explain that to me and what can be done?
So the flex routes that we have in NCTD are deviated fixed routes. So the Flex 371, that is the route that goes up to Ramona, which stops at the animal park. When you call in, you can call in and say you want to go to the animal park, and the driver will drive you into the park up to the gate. So it is a deviated fixed route, and it is set up for that purpose. So if you call and let us know, we will deviate and go up to the gate.
If I have attempted calling Lyft and directly to go there, and I've tried calling Access to get there, and both of them say it's not covered, and I know better.
Yes, it is covered, and if you call the NCTD reservation line, they will take care of it.
Something needs to be done to inform MTS Access, because that's where I'm starting out, and also to Lyft in North County, because I know there's people up there who would like to go there. Those agencies both need to be informed that, yes, that is an accessible location that has to be covered.
Okay, so MTS Access does not go to the Wild Animal Park.
No, I have to transfer, and I know
transfer at the Escondido Transit Center and catch the 371 out of the Escondido Transit Center, which would then take you to the animal park on NCTD's flex route, and then we would deviate for you.
But my problem is getting to the, to access the 371. I need to do paratransit because I can't use the fixed route.
Okay. Which you could take the paratransit to the Escondido Transit Center and then transfer over to the 371.
What I'm saying, what if I can't use the 371? Make that transfer. Because there are some people who can't transfer buses. So I'm going from paratransit and being required to use fixed transit when I'm saying I can't use it.
Okay. Why don't you give me a call and we'll work out the logistics for you on that.
Okay, hopefully it'll be worked out so other people can use it too.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
The other thing, another item I have, which is a unique one, and it's, if I go to the zoo, I can do this. In my case, my husband's mother needs 2 PCAs. We cannot leave her alone, but we can get out and run around, and we want to give her quality of life. But because it takes 2 PCAs, then we still have to, we pay for both or the extra PCA. At the zoo, with a doctor's note, a second PCA, when necessary, can get in for free. I'm wondering if that could be considered as a accommodation for people with extreme disabilities. Another issue I have is security. I'm getting tired of them pointing. I have a dog. She's pretty noticeable. She wears a harness, a little different than most dogs. But they insist on pointing. And I had an big issue with the security at the John Mills building. One day, I was actually threatened because I kept saying, I can't see where you're pointing, but they weren't going to let me come to a meeting. That's not the kind of treatment I should be getting. The same as I need to help with sometimes transferring, like if the trolley isn't working, I need somebody to help me get to the shuttle buses that they're using or other things. I need somebody who's trained how to talk to people and not point, and to be courteous to me, respectful to me, because I'm trying to insist that I need some answers. The other issue I have are the validators for the cards. Whether it's my phone or I have a card also. both of them. I have troubles getting on the buses, at the trolley stations, getting my card or phone lined up in order to get it to register. I don't know what can be done, but I talked to many people who are having the same issue, that it's really a nightmare. And I get very frustrated. A lot of drivers will just say, well, get on. Some drivers just really insist you got to pay up a fee. And I'm tying up the buses trying to figure out how to move my device so that it'll register. Then I have one last one, and it's with MTS. I love the fact that you have the reminders of my rides. I have voicemail. I don't know of anybody who doesn't have voicemail. Last night, I had 4 phone calls back to back from MTS. I figured it was to let me know about my times for today. I didn't answer because I wanted it in voicemail, because I happen to have either the voicemail or I have text messaging that comes, it'll convert it to text. I now don't have to call, find out what time my pickup time was or whatever. I can look at the message. Calling me 5 times, 4 times does not help if you don't leave a message. You're wasting my time, your time. And last night, they didn't even bother to call me. And this morning, when my vehicle arrived, I never got the call from MTS that I had a vehicle there. I got it from the taxi because that's what I was using. But it's a great idea to be able to notify people that when there's no message left, you're wasting my time and the machine's time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sure.
Hi, it's Sharon. And I have a question for Transit about the Pronto cards. I have a Pronto card because of coming here. Is there any way that I can put something in the profile to indicate that I would like alert notifications for routes that I frequently use when there's a change? For example, I'm on the 30 a lot, and the 30 has a detour for 6 months or 3 months, whatever it is. I think it's September to March, because of going up towards Nobel Drive and up that La Jolla Village Drive, up that way. But I didn't know about it. All of a sudden, I'm coming back from the UTC mall and the bus turns. I go, where's he going? So, because I don't think of going to the website every day to say, hey, what alerts are there? What detours on there? And the driver didn't say or make an announcement, and I sit in the back, didn't make an announcement to say, hey, we're going to have a detour because of yada, 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 yada. So I've got doctors up there. I've got the grocery stores up there. So I'd like to be able to do something in a profile with a Pronto card, if I have my own account set up, to say alert me on certain routes that I would like. I don't know if that's possible, but I think that would be sort of awesome. And that could either be via email or text. So that's my suggestion or question or whatever.
Okay, I don't have an answer for you right now, but let me look into it. I think you could sign up for generalized notifications. I don't know if you could specify them, but let me look into it and I'll follow up with you.
And then, Charles, how will you follow up?
Email. I have your email.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Sean.
That just reminds me that she said that about getting emails, that everybody can have access to emails. I'm sorry. A lot of people with disabilities, seniors, are on the outside of that. So when information is disseminated through emails, on the press, written, TV works because they talk. But remember, there's a lot of people who don't get that just because they cannot access it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move into item 7. I think some of the comments here go into item 7, which is unmet needs. Brian will provide a brief update, and then we can discuss, have discussion from members and the public.
Thank you, Chair. So we're continuing to document the messages and the input that we see for unmet needs throughout the last couple of years. We have a working file. Ashley helped me find that after Zach left. It was in a hidden place on our SharePoint site, but she helped me find that. We're still trying to think of a way that we can get that online so that can be viewed by everybody, to also then track our responses to some of them, because some of them are just general comments to MTS and NTD that they push forward to their staff, but others are maybe require response. So we'll still work to keep track of those as well. The coordinated plan folks had come, I think, in our last meeting to provide an update on, you know, their work with the coordinated plan. A big part of that is including unmet needs. So they'll be back. They're going to go out and do the survey, I think, here pretty soon. So I think you guys are told about that, but they'll come back and talk to you about that as well. But unmet needs is a big part of that as well, as they work on that draft of the coordinated plan over the spring and bring that back probably March, April, May. Ultimately needs to get approved by the board by the end of June. So they'll be bringing that back. And again, unmet needs is a big part of that. But I will open up this item again, just if there's anything that wasn't documented in the last item in terms of unmet needs, happy to hear them in this item.
We'll start off with any public comments.
Thank you, Chair. There are no public comments.
Okay, any member comments? Thank you so much. Our next meeting is January 21st at 10 a.m. And then the calendar is part of this agenda item. So if you wanted to get your 2025 ready. Well, have a good New Year, everyone, and thank you so much. Happy Thanksgiving.